Would you please welcome to the stage our main event tonight to discuss the state of the world and his creative life, Michael Leunig and Caroline Baum.
Thank you all very much for your patience, and thank you, Dan, for that lovely and very warm and very complete introduction. I understand that when you are invited to be, or when you're awarded National Living Treasure status, there's a do for which you have to wear a suit. And because Michael doesn't have a suit, he didn't go. And the great thing is that the dress code for tonight was casual, so here he is. I also found out from Michael at lunchtime today that he once fell asleep during an interview with Philip Adams. And so I think my job tonight is basically to try and keep him awake, because it's nearly past our bedtime. Whether he's drawing a cartoon or writing a prayer, painting a picture or penning a poem, Michael Leunig is the patron saint of the bewildered, the Mr. Curlys, the Vasco pajamas, and the little white ducks of the world. There are more and more of us, little white ducks, more and more bewildered people. I'm certainly bewildered, particularly today. But there is only one of him, so let's just give him another warm welcome. So let's start with maybe a few troublemakers, just get them out of the way. Troublemakers who may have been friends along the way, I don't know. I felt that I couldn't really start this evening's conversation with you, Michael, without asking you about Bill Leak and about how you felt when he died so suddenly, recently.
A lot of my friends are dying lately, so, well...
Was he a friend?
No, he wasn't.
I
met Bill a couple of times. Look, personally, I wasn't affected much by his work. I didn't much care for his work, to be quite frank. But, you know, I'm not much in the cartoon world as such, and there's a lot I don't like about it. A lot of its traditions, and I've just gone my way. But well, of course, a man passes, and I think he was probably in a lot of distress about the trouble he was in regarding that particular cartoon you may or may not know about Indigenous people. I think Bill, I didn't like that cartoon. I think Bill was acting quite ignorantly and just doesn't understand that question. But what I find odd is the way many journalists and columnists sort of uphold Bill as a great, crusader for freedom. And I don't know about this 18C thing. I think we do have constrictions on our freedom. We have libel and slander, and we accept those things. And we've got lots of freedom anyway, but I think the freedom to hurt, you've got to be careful with that one, and you can do it accidentally, but it became such a policy in that particular newspaper group, I think, that I didn't like it personally, and I'm no expert. I just didn't like it.
Okay, so we've dealt with that particular person. Let's move swiftly onto the person that you refer to, not even by his name, but as the obnoxious man. I think we know whom of you speak. Trump has been a great source of material for cartoonists, those cartoonists that you may see yourself as apart from because they are truly political cartoonists. But you referring to him as the obnoxious man, is that because you don't want to kind of even give him the dignity of his name?
That was a column I wrote. I felt there was something, well, clearly there was something obnoxious. Many people, whether you agree with him or not, a lot of people in the world and in America find something revolting and distressing. That this man is now, in that position, and it is obnoxious. It's noxious, poisonous. I think people are repulsed by something, and they can't it's so obvious, but I know that's not enough to
No,
just
no,
to
well,
say that
it is
these
enough.
days, but
It is enough.
it fascinates me, the primal distaste for that man in the populace, in the world. I'm fascinated because I've got a kind of psychoanalytic consciousness, and I'm interested in why people are so revolted by particular people, sometimes unjustly, sometimes unfairly, but I'm still curious what it is about that man's qualities that are displayed in his mannerisms, in his face, in the gestalt, as they would call it, just the way he positions himself and speaks.
Is that because you yourself find it difficult to maintain the emotion of hatred for any length of time, or are you a good hater?
No, I'm not a good hater, and I'm not trying to sound, puritanical and a nice person, but I think I've got past any. It's not my condition to hate. I'm very fascinated in the quality of forgiveness, which I grew up with in the culture, that this was a worthy and important quality, and in these very acrimonious times in the press and this tone in social media and politics and television and media of people tearing strips off each other and picking each other up on every little thing. I find this very interesting and very upsetting. And it's the split, you would call this in some ways, that either or. We are the good people, they are the bad people. And it's if people need this strange division of the world into the bad guys and the good guys. This fascinates me as a social observer and an observer of the psychological state of our culture. This need
Well, you
for
say that, but
hostility.
you talk about that sort of split and that kind of polarization, which definitely does exist at the moment in society. But I read something that you wrote where you said that there are really only two states of being, and one is love and the other is fear. And that's a pretty black and white summation.
Well, there's a North Pole and a South Pole, and there's a whole lot in between them, so that is, I don't think these are sort of contradictory, like there's life and death, there are obvious polarities, and there's the traffic lights, which is stop or go. I don't find that a polarity, a divided mind, to talk about love and fear. These are states of mind between which there is a long journey, and they're connected, in other words. And
a continuum.
A continuum, yes. So,
do you spend a lot of time in a state of fear? Creatively?
Well, fear is sort of anxiety, isn't it, I suppose, dread, insecurity, instability. I think our society is pretty anxious, stressed. I personally I don't think I've ever been an inordinate sufferer from fear or anxiety.
So, for example,
but as I get older, I feel for the world, and there's an anxiety in hearing the news tonight, for instance.
Of course, but I'm thinking just on a more personal level, for example, do you have a complex relationship with the notion of a deadline? I mean, you've been working to a deadline for decades, but does that mean that you're used to the deadline, or is the deadline a sort of a kind of useful creative point of dread, a focus for a certain kind of anxiety that actually makes you work?
Yeah, sure, it is. But there's also fun in it too. There's a daring and a daring do, and you've got to. Can you do this? Yes, I can. It's a boyish thing that makes you want to do the daring thing a bit, to say, to make a cartoon and have it done by that time and have it go towards out into the public world and have it judged and condemned or whatever, and say, I don't care anyway. There's a bit of that, whatever, I accept that, and to live with the outcome. There's sort of vitality in that, I find, and I enjoy that vitality, that aliveness of being. I don't think I'm addicted to it, I had to do it. I was desperate to make a living back then. I was terrible in my education. My friends went to university and got degrees and jobs. I didn't. And I was desperate to find work. I was working in the factories and, all that, and which was that was my college, that was my university where I learned a lot and developed my art, I think. And so, yeah, I'll do the deadline because, when you get a hard job, when you're a labourer, can you do that? Yeah, I better do that. I want the money. So, suddenly you get into cartooning like you get into music. I mean, say a singer sings a song on the street corner and gets a few dollars, or then gets a gig, and then they say, oh, we like that, come back and do it again. So that's how you get into it. You can't go to school and learn it.
But what happens, have you ever missed a deadline, or have you ever had a dry patch where nothing came?
Oh, some terrible things came. I should have done nothing. It would have been better to totally fail. But I do remember this funny time when I was very young, just starting out, because I got a job, an editor of a newspaper said, look, can you do 6 cartoons a week and have them done by 9:30 in the morning? And I said, yep. And of course, I didn't know whether I could do it, and you have to just try it. So I remember it was about 3 months into a job, and I remember the day Bertrand Russell died, the British sort of philosopher, and I tried to do a cartoon about it for some reason. I don't know. Well, I thought this was a good idea. And then I just did this appalling cartoon. It was just so bad I can't even remember it. And I took it up and I plonked it on the editor's desk at exactly 9:30. And I did something that I'd only seen in films, in B-grade American films. I ran to the pub. And I wasn't much of a drinker, but I had this feeling that if I had a vodka, it will be all right. And I found myself standing on the doorstep of the pub waiting for it to open at 10 o'clock. I thought, what has become of me? Because as I say, I really wasn't a drinker. And I remember going in and getting a double vodka and a pot of beer at 10 in the morning, could you believe? Because I'd heard that journalists do that sort of thing. And I'm only 24 at the time. I thought, well, I've got to grow up, And so I did that. And I didn't stag back. I wandered back sort of and did another cartoon for the next edition, which was sort of okay. That's the only time I got that out of my system, and no, I've never been through that again.
Wow. Okay, let's deal with one more troublemaker.
Yeah.
Pauline Hanson.
Oh. Well, Pauline Hanson is there was a lot of Pauline Hansons in where I grew up. Mm-hmm. It's just one of the Australian archetypes, I suppose, in some ways, but she's in a very, serious position, I guess. I don't know. I don't know much anymore. The older I get, the less I can work it out. I've just probably become a natural kind of Buddhist who says, well, whatever, there's Pauline, and one of God's creatures, I would have. Well, this is how my grandparents used to talk. They'd say, one of God's creatures, and it is true. And it's like the people who elect Trump, whoever they are, or elect anyone for that matter. We're all so peculiar, and the world is kind of pretty mad. And the older I get, the more I think, we are all so different. Everyone here in the audience tonight, they've got a different story, so different. It's a wonder you can even sit together. And it's a miracle that you can sit together, I think, because we are so, so different. And yet, what is the common ground? I don't know. And I think the great task of life is to bear with each other's difference a bit, and to bear with it. And in a marriage, you know what it's like. It's hard work. And as it goes on, you get to think, oh, I don't know about that. But etc. So it is a miracle of how do we coexist as free-thinking people, as open people. Sure, we can be regulated into a sort of, you get along with each other and don't say anything wrong. We live in more liberated times, and how do you get along in those times?
Well, given everything that you've just said, Who do you like in public life? Who do you look at and think, there's someone with some integrity, there's someone, you know, whose values I subscribe to? Who do you like?
I don't have any sort of photos up on my wall of any people. I like all people. I do like people. I like the audience tonight because they're here to listen to me, and thank you for that. And I'm genuine in saying that. So we were talking before about getting nervous. I said, I never get nervous about coming onto a stage because I think I've got to love the audience, really. I've got to love them. And it is a sort of, might be a delusion, it might be something, but it's a good feeling to feel well disposed to people who've given up time to come to you. And so you don't worry.
Well, I take your point, and I think, you know, this is an audience that's clearly very happy to see you, but at the... Yes. That much is clear. But I just want to raise the fact that sometimes you do stick your neck out with cartoons about controversial points of view where it seems to me one of your great skills is to be able to express the other point of view from the dominant or more popular point of view, and you're not afraid to go into that terrain. And one of those issues recently for you has been the anti-vaccination issue. And I think we all know in this room how much you're loved, but I'm interested in what it feels like to get hate mail and to be the object of hatred.
Well, but more importantly, what's it like to not be heard in what you're saying and how to be twisted in what you're saying publicly and to be sort of dragged through the mud and not be able to speak back on the ABC television and be sort of misconstrued deliberately by a kind of hysterical reaction. My view on vaccination is my private business, and I've never gone into that publicly. All I raised on the question of anti-vaccination, something stirred in me about a human rights issue, and I thought it was worth raising, is the compulsion. And if a mother, whether I agree with her or not, if a mother in particular, let's not talk about the father for a minute, let's talk about this mother who's carried this baby in her body and given birth, has a conscientious reservation about someone sticking some substance in that baby, and if she has a conscientious, problem with that, let's listen to her. That's all I'm saying. Why should she be yelled down and coerced? That's a very serious thing you're asking a person to submit to. And it could be the thin edge of a wedge, because each year more and more vaccinations, etc. As I say, my view is my business, and it's not an issue in the cartoon. But, so I instantly says, I'm a crazy, I believe in Martians, and the kind of vilification that comes to you from saying there's possibly a human rights issue and we shouldn't rush headlong into it. Just to say that, I thought, what's happened to my culture? What's happened to the democratic ideas? What's happened to conscience? Because I was a conscientious objector when I was conscripted, and I was worse than that. I was a non-cooperator, and so I know what it's like to act out of a strong feeling which you believe is intelligent, is thoughtful, and based on conviction.
Principle.
From your heart,
Principle.
from your soul. And I've admired people in history who've acted like that. And yet there's this modern compliance emerging and sort of groupthink and right-think, and it's worth thinking about all the time.
Is that something that you think you've always been able to do? I was very struck by the fact that you had done I think it was a cartoon where you wrote something which was from the point of view of the shark in summer looking at humans on the beach. And I thought, gee, I'd never really thought about how a shark sees us when it's swimming up and down the beach. And I wondered whether you've always been able to empathise with the other, whether the other is a shark or the mother of a child who doesn't want a needle stuck into that child, or a paedophile, or a people smuggler, or a torturer.
You have to understand as much as you can, I think. I don't know. to empathise, even, is it my early Sunday school time, you know, it said, you know, it spoke of forgiveness, or seeing it, or, you know, that the, hang on, you know, we're all flawed, we make mistakes, we are all broken. Life is an injury, I said the other day. And it's hard, and it's a struggle. And so people who cross the line and break the law and end up in jail, has anyone ever been into a prison? I've been in one, not as a, you know, an inmate, but I toured one. It was a shocking feeling, and my feeling for those men. And I didn't know what they'd done, but it's not easy to look at people incarcerated. So empathy is a child's thing. That's where my empathy came from. I think it goes back to childhood. You feel for someone. I think children can do it very easily. I think children are it's the most spiritual time of life, it would seem. And then you might pick it up a bit when you get very old again. But I think it's part of a child's capacity to empathise and feel for, and as a way of understanding life. And
You talked before about how split we are and how there's a lot of anger around at the moment. And I was just wondering, it seems to me that we're living at the moment in a state of almost perpetual indignation, and that indignation is not very sustainable. It's not a very nourishing feeling. At first you get the impression that being indignant is quite satisfying because you get your dander up and you get all sort of shirty about things, but then it's sort of got nowhere to go. I mean, do you find that with indignation, that it's not particularly useful for you creatively?
no, it's not. You come against a wall. It's this sort of energy you get from anger, because people are very energised by having a strong view, and it's a cheap energy, and there's a hangover from it too. And there's trouble in anger. There is always trouble. There's often trouble, which bothered me. I remember seeing, as a very small boy, I saw two men having a fist fight, coming off a boat on a pier. They'd gone fishing or something. And it was so, it was just so powerful impression on me, as sad and terrible. Yeah, so these early epiphanies, or if you like, they stay deeply within you.
Because it's even pervasive in language. You've got a lovely cartoon in one of your books of someone ordering a smashed avocado on toast, and all the language that he uses carries the same violence and aggression in it, and he's ordering from the waiter without being in any way aware of the language being so loaded with these words.
I remember this.
So do you think that we are unconsciously sort of tolerating violence, or somehow accommodating violence by using words like smashed avocado?
Yes, there's a lot of foods that are, you know, bashed and beaten, and you know, whipping the eggs, and it's all, yeah, it's awful. But well, of course, we have a violent culture. Look, I'm sounding dreadfully negative, which was one of the worst sins you can commit in our culture, it seems, sometimes to say, hang on, are we all going mad? I said, don't be so negative, we're completely sane. But no, you take it like this. We drive cars along freeways at 110 kilometres an hour, right? We know damn well that at any moment someone could run into us coming that way. So we've become adjusted to this potential for violent death and velocity, which the soul cannot understand. I mean, imagine if a person from 200 years came back and sat in a car and you took them for a ride. They'd be screaming. And I think somehow there's something within us that is subconsciously screaming, the way we live, the speed, the noise. It's so, I've watched it in my own lifetime, that heightening and intensifying of a kind of a violent, the lighting of the city street. You see, I'm what you call a snowflake or something, aren't I? But I'm not, because I've had to live too. But I do think we have this word that is not used anymore, that was the language of my grandparents' generation. They spoke of the soul, not as a religious concept, but an inner kind of truthful, deeper self, which feels things that our mind doesn't see. It's always responding, and I'm fascinated in how we are an egotistical culture. It's all intellectual, or not intellectual, it's what the mind can see and talk about. As an artist, I'm interested in what is repressed, what is going more deeply all the time, and that's the work of an artist, to express what is repressed and be interested in what we're carrying, what pain, what anxiety, what joy is repressed too, the capacity for absolute joy. And our musicality is possibly repressed, or our lyrical language, our lyrical sense of the world. We're starting more and more to use the language of science, of law, and the beautiful lyrical language which the Irish were often so good at. That sort of lyricism and metaphor and mythological references. You can say a lot of things there. And so the poet is always restoring that, trying to bring it back and saying, look, and you talk about these people snarking at each other about, say, political correctness, or you shouldn't say that, you should say that, and such scrutiny. It's like going through the airport security, with your language being checked out, and you think, oh, it's just the soul's language.
And then adding to the language of science and the law, I get the impression that you are also concerned about technology, and that technology has invaded every corner of life, and that you talk about technology as fascism. You have used that expression. And I was just wondering how you navigate that, given that it's a necessary tool, it's part of life, we can't put that genie back in the box. You've had to navigate that as a parent, as an artist. So can you just talk about your relationship to technology?
Well, it comes down to this to start with, that we must have it and it mustn't have us. And I think that's, how do we hold this thing? How do we keep it in its place? As St. George and the Dragon, it is said, St. George didn't slay the dragon, he actually tamed the dragon, you see. And it's not... so it's, how do we not become so seduced by these seductive addictions? Because an addiction is something you're habitually wanting, and that is not healthy for you, that's hurting you.
Are you addicted to anything like that? I mean, secretly, are you checking your phone all the time?
There are moments when I'm checking the phone, obviously from necessity, but I don't think I'm an addict as such. I love to make conscious decision. I like to have, I've invented a little saying for myself, which is pretty banal and boring. Sit down, go blank, stay put. And I'm good at going blank. No, I really am. And if I miss the train, I say, thank God I've missed the train. I can sit there and wait and do nothing. Honestly, it's a joy to miss the train. And it's true. And I don't take the phone out. I sit and I just go blank. And I've always been like Dad, I was called a dreamer at school, according to my mother. Michael's in a world of his own. And I think, great, we all should have a world of our own, which is not of this earth and these cars racing by and this technology, that to cultivate and maintain that world which is not of this world. And that's what I like about the cartoons I make, which are not of this world and are not relevant to what Malcolm Turnbull said this day, even though they be important in a civic sense. If we just surrender this beautiful dream world and this lyrical world where love is grown and practiced, and forgiveness and understanding and compassion, these are things sort of not of this world in a way. They can be brought to bear upon this world, but where do you cultivate them? You cultivate them in your own silence, or when you lay your head on the pillow, when you wake up at night in terror at 3 a.m., as I can do.
Mm-hmm. Even you do that, do you? Okay.
Yeah, it's a kind of like an incoherent sense of, it's an unholy time, and I accept it now. I think I used to not, since I had this accident, I have been having troubles with sleep. It's interrupted at about 3 a.m. and
We should just explain about the accident. So tell us exactly what happened, because it happened last year, didn't it? It was January last year.
yeah,
And it was on your property in the bush?
yeah, it was in the bush, and I was going into an underground fire shelter, and the steel trapdoor came down on my head and on my arm, and I had what's called a distracting injury, and so you don't feel that one, you feel that one, and that's the worst one. So I had a concussion, and I didn't understand the symptoms of concussion. 3 weeks later, there'd been a bleed on my brain, and I had a seizure, and I woke up in an ambulance, and then they cut a hole in my head as big as a 50-cent piece, they said, to take the pressure off. And so that's a trauma, and it's a near-death experience and all that sort of thing. And then there's a great consequence to that, and so there's some insomnia set in.
But you said after the accident that it had been a kind of epiphany and that your values had altered as a result. And I'm really interested to know how those values altered.
Well, I don't know, it was a radical alteration, and it's mixed up with getting older, because I've gone past the 70 now, and which was the biblical lifetime, and then a certain liberation can come then, and you say, well, I've had my life, now I can have my soul or something, I can be free, or
You're in
a
extra
little bit.
time.
Pardon?
You're in extra time.
Something like that, I don't know, but it can. And I've always admired the work of artists and writers when they get very senior. There's some fantastic, and Picasso, it's taken me my whole life to learn how to draw like a child, that sort of statement. And so there's a certain joy can come. But so there's that, but then there's the funny, seemingly contradictory thing of, aches and pains and stuff that people have, and then if you go to a hospital and have a hole put in your head, and it's funny, I wrote a poem about that sort of thing once. It's funny how many poems and cartoons become what do you call a little, it's a prediction for your life. These come true. There's so many of my cartoons have come true in my own life. It's scary because there's a few there that still haven't come to fruition yet, and they're not pretty. And this one was there's this guy saying, "Magpie, magpie, dive on me, swoop down from your holy tree, make a hole in my." It was. Sorry, I've forgotten it. That's another thing that happens.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
When you have a hole in
lot
your
of
head.
things go disappearing from your memory, and they come back. But it was about a magpie. This guy begging the magpie to make a hole in his head and look in there and see if he's happy. And is my soul a happy thing? Yeah. So where was I?
Your values
I'm wandering
altering.
off, which is good, into my other world.
Yeah.
And so I'll get it. If I sit here and go blank and stay put, I'll get it, what I'm trying to say. It is about, what was it about?
Well, we were talking about whether your values had altered, how your values had altered.
Yeah, probably intensified. I mean, it's famous to have a bit of a near-death experience, and it's a trauma, and there's violence in it, and it's the omnipotence of childhood is further knocked back. You're not invincible. I don't think I had that illusion, but and then you come into contact with so many people who are suffering through illnesses of all sorts and injuries, and you sort of become more sensitized to these people, the suffering world, and it is huge, and nobody escapes in the end, sort of, and then the compassion, and life is it becomes more beautiful too, and more sad and touching.
Do you
what
think
people find in themselves and for each other?
Having had a near-death experience, then, do you think more about death itself?
Yeah, I think about it, but I don't feel I worry about it. In fact, at the time, I thought, oh, well, I might die, okay. And I never got, and I was in the ambulance, and I thought, oh, it's terrific. You wake up in an ambulance, you don't understand why. And you see this lovely young man who looked like a Year 12 student. He was a paramedic, sort of leaning over me with great intensity and worried look, and I felt the need to console him. I did. And apparently I was very cheerful and concerned for everyone around me, which is funny. And I thought, well, I could die, yeah, okay. And yeah, that was odd.
Because one of the things
I'd had a lot of death
that you said at lunchtime that struck me was you said that you don't have any regrets, and I think that that's a very fortunate position to be in and a very healthy attitude to have. But I wonder whether there was anything that you would have done differently in your life, even without regret, or anything that you look back on now and you think, I was wrong about that. I was definitely wrong about that.
I started writing a memoir. We were talking about this. I've started, and I think a starting point was that I've done everything wrong. I never had a plan. I never had an ambition. I was just drifting, and still am in a sense.
And you've talked about that. I thought that was really interesting that you said that your entire kind of creative process comes from regression, and that you've done everything to sort of to counteract the striving impulse. That striving is not what it's about for you.
No. As I say, there's a reason I didn't do good at school, and it's not that I was lazy. I just wanted to do what I wanted to do. I was interested in life and other things, and I didn't have a plan. I didn't. See, some people are brought up, and it's in the family tradition. You learn this is good habits. You learn and you aim toward, and you get signed up to the Melbourne Cricket Club the day you're born or something because it's going to be good for your career and all this sort of stuff. My father didn't know any of that. He was a slaughterman, my father. He didn't know that, and so he was nothing he could pass on to his son about, how you prosper in the world. And my mother was just a very sort of spirited woman who was uneducated, and so you just live on your wits and on the day and and I realise now most people don't live like that. I don't think
Everything is about striving. Everything is about getting ahead.
Well, I'm very impressed with people who discipline their life and organise it and all that. I feel appallingly. Do I have regrets? The whole thing is a regret in one way, in a sort of a way. And I just accept that. I think, oh well, what else could I have done on the day? That's what seemed like a good idea at the time. And I think it's about acceptance of just saying, oh well, I'm not going to fret.
Because I'm really interested, Michael, in the fact that most of the writers that I've interviewed in this kind of situation say that they have a voice inside their head, which is a kind of internal editor's voice. And that voice is editor's voice. And that editor is always a very, very harsh critic saying, your work's no good, your work's shit. It's never a voice of encouragement. You never have an internal voice. I have never met an artist who said they had an inner voice that was positive and nurturing and encouraging. Have you not had that critical voice?
Oh yeah, I've had that voice, yeah.
But
I have another voice. I've got another voice as well.
Voice.
And the other voice is saying, oh look, you're enjoying yourself here. See, if I want to make a little cartoon, it's like this stage. This is a stage, Proscenium March, I think, isn't it? And so it's like the border around my cartoon is in the paper. So I do a square, and then in that I can invent a world. And so the boy who was the inventor, who I was, always trying to invent, working with bits of wire and doing things, playing. So playing overrides these critical voices. The little mischief maker, the good mischief, the play, the thrill. And so I draw that thing, and then I hear the editor's voice saying, oh, you should do something relevant about the economy because it's all important today. And I go, oh, come on. There is deeper, lovelier, more central things that people feel as on their pillow at night and around the kitchen table. Not what these people are talking about on, what's that show on Monday night? Q&A. You know, they always try to say, this is the main game. Everybody, this is the main game. It's in Canberra. It's about all these commentators. And this is what Bill Leake was into. And all these people. And good, yeah, we've got to have that. But I'm not in it. And I'm glad I'm not in it because there is another game, which is, you know, the life of the soul and the life between you and me, or me and you. And it's organic and it's spirited and it's alive, and that's where vitality is, and that's the spirit of a culture and a nation. And it's immeasurable, but it's alive, and you've got to keep it alive and speak into it and use the words of that and look after it. And the main game, just keep it in its place, the alleged main game. But so I think I've got to the end of that. No, there was something I was going to say. You all know the feeling. So I've worked at this little square, and I'm inventing this character, and I really feel for them. I draw that person, and I think that's a mood, a feeling I've got, this sort of cheeriness about life, this sort of funny, organic, and at one with the animals. And so that seems to take over from the negative voice and the voice of all the intellectuals who said, this isn't real poetry. Because, you know, you write a verse and suddenly all the voices of all the fine poets, the important intellectual poets are saying, oh, no, that's not poetry. And you think, well, why isn't it poetry? So there's a little defiance in there too. There's a defiant voice. And I've always never felt part of, you know, the intellectual circle, even though I'm not anti-intellectual at all, but not part of the literary world or anything. I don't, you know, it always amuses me that I'm at a writers' festival because I don't sort of in some ways belong. But I'm happy. It doesn't mean to say I'm resentful or got a sort of a cringing attitude. I like people and talking, but I don't feel I'm really up there with the heroes or anything like that. I don't, because it's so stratified. And there's all this thing at school, you know, you get that mark, and this is the real poetry, but this is just silly infantile verse, or you're doing rhymes, are you? Rhyming couplets, oh, that's stupid. But you see, I'm also affected by my folk language. It's a dialect which my parents spoke, which their parents spoke a bit. I think I like to. The art world has failed in some ways. It becomes too esoteric, too removed from the spirit, and a lot of people find it hard to access. And they look at art and art prizes, and they go, "What in the name of God are they talking about?" You know, all this curatorial language, which is bunkum. It's just nonsense. And I'm not being anti-intellectual or anti-art, but I do think they've let the culture down a bit. They've gone off on this damn thing of being excellent, award-winning, amazing, and it just gets higher and higher and just disappears up the chimney. And I think you've got to dare to keep it a little bit grounded too, and just try to communicate and reach, if you're an artist or in the media, it's nice to keep it reaching people who feel left out or don't quite get it but want to get it, and the children being born every day who are just coming into it. You know, they don't want this esoteric language. It's unapproachable and full of the didactic finger, you know. No, not good enough, not good enough. You
Gotta
see?
watch that finger. I am going to invite you to use the microphones here to ask Michael questions. So start thinking about what it is that you would like to ask Michael so that we can make the most of every minute that we've got together. Given that we are not only really at a writers' festival, this is also a readers' festival. I wanted to ask you, Michael, about what you read, how you choose what you read, because it strikes me that you might be quite an unorthodox reader, a Catholic reader, a very... well, I'm just interested in what's by your bed,
Oh,
book-wise.
well, I found a book on a tram the other day in Melbourne, and it had a note in it and said, "Would the finder please enjoy this book?"
Oh.
And apparently it's some sort of thing that's happening.
It's called book crossing, and it's a
What's
really
it called?
lovely thing where you release a book out into the world.
Yeah, and that was sweet.
And
So
you track its journey.
that sits there, and that's a book about autism, and by an American woman whose name I forget, who was
Oh,
autistic.
Taylor Grandin.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that one. Yeah, so I skimmed that. And then I'm reading this book about, I'm not this conscientious guy who immediately remembers the name of the author and knows about them, but someone handed me a book about the history of nighttime and how humans have existed in the night, and what happened before electricity, and how night used to be divided up into... First we went to bed with the birds, and slept. Then we woke up, perhaps at about 1 or 2, and got up. And,
Yes.
And did a bit.
That's fascinating. And we ate something.
We ate something, we said prayers, we did a bit of work of some sort or other, with the candlelight, and then we went back and had another run. And so this suits me to know about this at the moment. And it's not so bad. I was fretting trying to get right through, 8 hours or something. And I think, hey, so I wake up now at 2 and I think, okay, damn it, I'll do something. And so you might read or you get up and make a cup of tea.
Would you draw at night?
Oh, I get little ideas at night and little, because you think differently at night. At the start of the book it says, the night is when we become who we really are, and the daytime is where we act as we are supposed to act. And there's some truth in that. So, and it points to the Jungian idea of the unconscious and the dark and the light, etc. And that's sweet. So the thoughts that can come in the night are yours more. They're sort of free and a bit feral and lovely and wild, like a bird that's wild, and it's lively. Ideas could come.
When you mentioned the memoir that you're dabbling in at the moment, are you thinking that you might make that a graphic memoir, or are you thinking of writing a text as a sort of conventional book?
That's
or
what
are you...
I'm thinking of. Yes, just a text. I do love words. I do love the words.
Do you have a favourite word?
No, I love the musicality of words, and sometimes I'll see a word and it's delicious. It's like a meal.
Like what?
Oh, well, if you say like what, I'll think about those words. I'll say, gee, like is such a beautiful word. Or something, I'll dwell on it. But and I often think about writers, if this was a meal, would I enjoy it? Because a lot of clever writing, which is very sort of self-consciously full of astonishing, amazing metaphors, and that turns me off. As I think it was who wrote Catcher in the Rye. Salinger said, I think he did say once something about if good writing, you don't notice that it's good, you just read it, and I think there's something in that, and to write that with that flow. But there's a lot of very self-consciously, writerly sort of writing, which I'm not so keen on. It's just a bit... I like the folk language. I like
what do you think
the sentimental language that I heard when I was young. There's some value in that too.
What do you think when a word like bogan suddenly gets sort of thrust out into the kind of world and used as much as it's become a very kind of current term? What do you think about that word and its implication of class? What do you think about that?
Of bogan?
Yeah, you like it, do you?
I don't know. I think it's funny. It's got a funny sound to it, and it's got implications which are feral and peculiar. And where does it come from? You know, someone once told me, an old friend who was a great writer and a playwright, he said, all the good jokes are made up by prisoners in jails. I don't know whether that's true, but it seemed like a plausible thing. Or, you know, from the military and stuff. So I don't know, where does Bogan come from? And, you know,
I thought that you
the
might
vernacular.
really... It's funny, I imagined you really disliking that word because of the sort of pejorative kind of condescension that it might imply, but you don't.
Well, there's a lot of... I grew up with people who were not... That word wasn't current.
No.
Hooligans was the word then, which is probably an Irish word. And I grew up with those people and understand them. These were my friends also, because I was, you know, working class with its language, and I'm not saying that therefore I'm tribally working class, but it was just lovely to hear the language of my father in the meatworks, and that he was a lovely, articulate man in a funny Australian way. And he spoke well too. He never dropped to, you know, he wouldn't say I'm going out. He said I'm going out. And so, you know, I think Paul Hogan came along and destroyed all that lovely original working class language. He made it a caricature, which wasn't true. But so language, yeah.
That bell just rang, that church bell, so it's 9 o'clock, so we're at the
Oh,
hour.
isn't it great to have a bell?
Isn't it nice to have a bell, isn't it?
Once I'll just say one last story which comes to mind, and it'll probably bore the pants of everyone. I won't make it long. I was in Italy. I had the good fortune to be given an Australia Council studio in the north of Italy for 3 months in the summer, and it was a beautiful time. And right next door was a huge old church with masses of bells, which the Italian bells ring in a rather wild, dissonant way, and it's not all pretty, it's feral again. And so the climate was lovely. It would rain at night and the sunshine in the day, and the tomatoes would grow really quick. It was really good. And anyway, one night there was a mass, and there was an old man who rang the bells. It was his job to look after the bells. And one night there was a massive electrical storm, like, you know, it was just huge. And thunder and lightning, and it was wild. And the old man got up and got on the bells at about 2 a.m. and spoke back to the storm, you know. And he rang the bells so wildly for about half an hour. It was, and with the electrical storm, and, you know, when I hear the bells, it brings it back to me. Yeah. It brings it back. So you're lucky having bells in your town.
Well, I think that they are tolling to say that it's time for you to ask a question. So if you'd like to come to the microphone, which is just there, just next to you there, yes, you, to that microphone, and then we'll come to the lady in the third row, and then there's someone over here. If you'd like to go first.
Hello, Michael.
Yes.
When Dan introduced you earlier, the MC, he spoke about you being a devout nature lover, and I love nature. I grow plants and have lizards and a spider that lives in my bedroom as of today. Live and let live. And I do a lot of soul work with people, and one of the things that I do to help them connect with nature is an outdoor earthing and forest bathing relaxation group. So I would like to be able to refer to myself as a devout nature lover like yourself, but I'm not sure what is actually meant by that term. So can you please explain to us what for you being a devout nature lover is?
Nature lovering, did you say?
Nature lover.
No, just a nature lover.
Just a nature lover.
Well, what would I mean by that? I don't know. We are nature, aren't we? Yeah, so I kind of don't feel... Like, I think this word human nature points to that, and nature is dangerous, it's beautiful. As an old Indigenous man I knew from the Northwest said about the world he grew up in, each day faces you like a murderer. And a powerful thing to say, but he was talking about why they were initiated so carefully to know about the dangers. And it was an enlivening instruction. Each day faces you like a murder. So nature is beautiful and it's lovely, but also I live up in the bush a lot of the time and know what it's like to be in a bushfire and caught in a bushfire and be surrounded in your vehicle by a bushfire, etc. And I've had a tree come down pretty much on top of me at one point, etc. So it's like that. You've got to have you must have huge respect. And yes, it's so healing and to go there and to breathe it and be amongst my friends, the trees, etc. I mean, most of us probably love our gardens.
You say in one of the pieces in Musings from the Inner Duck, the last couple of lines says, you say, I want to be less human now and be more creaturely. And so maybe that's that sort of connection at a sort of more natural
Yes, I
level.
don't... Yes, sorry, Caroline.
No, I'm not going to cut you off, but I think there was a lady, you came to the front, and then we'll come to the lady in, I think you're in blue. So, yes, sparkly. You're sparkling. You're sparkling at me. Oh, well, no, okay.
Okay. Decades ago, Michael, I saw a cartoon of yours of a father and son, and the father had his arm lovingly about the son's shoulders, and they were watching a sunrise on the television, and out the window was a sunrise. And that stuck with me, obviously. And I just wonder if the Pollyanna impulse is your natural fallback, because obviously there's a lot of angst and sadness, but do you sort of manage, I mean, you created the duck and Mr. Curly and all these uplifting creatures, so do you just sort of go, oh God, this is horrible, but there's going to be a sunrise or a sunset or whatever?
Yeah, that cartoon was just pointing to the strange, you know, what is it, the contradiction of, yeah, watching something on the telly and there it is out the window. Do I sort of oscillate or move between the dark and the light? Well, I think every writer and every dramatist and every human who talks at the kitchen table does, sort of. It's not so bad, and I think it's important to do it.
Are you an optimist?
Am I an optimist? People always ask me that. I say, no, I'm neither an optimist or a pessimist. I'm an enthusiast, you know. And then there's a lovely thing that there are people who say the glass is half empty and people say, oh, the glass is half full. But these people should be reminded that the glass is refillable. And so well, that's where I stand on it.
We are going to come to you, and I promise we'll come to you, but Lady in Green.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This comes from a friend of mine who had not a head injury. Sorry, I can tell that you can't hear me. You've had a head injury, and a friend of mine, Ben Lesky, had a brain tumor, and it was removed, and it came back. And one of your drawings comforted him so much, and it was the one that said, let it go, let it out, let it all unravel, let it free. I can't really sing. And you will feel
a path on which to travel.
A path on which to travel.
Yes.
So he's 34. He looked at that drawing almost every day.
Yeah.
At his PhD defense, he had it up. So when you say your silly verses, I want you to know that you spoke to his soul and gave him comfort.
Yeah.
And may that give you comfort as you manage your own head injury. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, thank you. I think obviously art and writing can have a wonderful therapeutic effect, I think. And I hear similar stories.
You're so polite.
I was at the Opera House last year and I saw Linda Barry with Matt Groening. Linda Barry said that you are a treasure and that we are very, very lucky to have you.
Who said? I missed that.
Linda Barry.
Yeah.
Okay. She's a friend of Matt Groening's. He did The Simpsons. And she said, we're very lucky to have you.
Oh, yes.
I wonder if you feel that same way, not necessarily about her, but or or some other artist? Do they inspire you?
Yeah, of course. I mean, they all do, and just it's the spirit of what they all share, and what writers are often on about and poets are on about. There's something in common. It's funny, people say sometimes to me, "Who influenced you?" And I'm meant to rattle off someone that's well known, but I often come back to people I went to school with. Truly. The funniest man I ever knew was Ray Lee. No one's heard of Ray Lee. He's my friend at school. They sent him off to Vietnam in the war, and he came back without his sense of humour. It came back. But yeah. So of course I don't have a great catalogue of names in my head. I tend to look at things randomly. I see a painting. I don't need to know who painted it necessarily.
Music's very important to you too.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, music so all the musicians, whoever they be, from the person who's on the street, you know, one of the most beautiful moving singers I heard was in Dublin, a little urchin girl. She was singing outside in this ratty lane every morning, and she had a little tin cup, and she'd bang on the cobblestones there, and she had big sort of woolly hair, and one morning I didn't think, I was so transfixed by her voice, and moved, and I didn't think to put a penny in a thing, so one morning I did. And she just grabbed it and ran. And she bolted up the lane. I said, "Where's she going with such purpose?" And I sort of hurried along behind, and she went down that one. I sort of walked along. And she ran into a bingo hall and was up at a Space Invaders machine with the money straight away. So there's this beautiful Celtic kind of mystical voice, and there's the Space Invaders machine. Look, really, I don't have like these heroic artists. I have from time to time along the way. You find this one's work, and you find Rilke the poet, or whatever. And there's just a continuous river of people, and some known, some not known, and just the work of children on the footpath is truly riveting to me. When they outside the local fish and chip shop, their parents are there eating, and they're out there with their chalk, and you think, that's what I call a drawing. And it's wandering along, and it's doing this and doing that. So I'm a bit sort of impressed with the whole impulse towards creating the other world, you know.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sparkles.
Thank you, Michael, from someone who adores you, because I think of you as somebody who answers the question that Albert Einstein once said, the only question that really matters is the universe friendly?
Is it friendly?
Is it friendly?
Okay.
He said, is it friendly? And I think of you as providing us with this friendliness about life.
Oh, thank you. That's a good one.
And he was also asked by a whole lot of earnest academic PhD students once, is there anything that's unfathomable? Is there anything mysterious that we've yet... What area could we go into? And he said, there is. He said, there is. He said, someday somebody was going to find out about the mystery of prayer. Of prayer.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you about the inspiration that you have in regard to the writing the prayers. I give your prayers as your book of prayers as consolation to everybody.
Yeah.
Because I think that they are accessible and mysterious and beautiful and wonderful and all the things that you can't often say. So I wonder if you could just express to us or tell us a little bit about this mystery of prayer.
I don't know. See, I don't know particularly, and I wrote it out of... it's a difficult time in life, and sort of talking to self, or wishing, or I don't know, I just wanted to... It's an offering, I guess. I think that's what all artists do. They offer, for better or for worse. And so look, sometimes I don't know why I'm sitting up here. And this is serious. I don't know. It seems odd that all these people, and I've only just become aware of how far the people extend back. It does seem to be not at what I expect in life, that everyone should sit there and listen, and I go blathering on. And I'm genuine when I say this, I can't explain to you. I don't know, it doesn't
What about
seem...
the impulse, maybe some of the prayers, I think, come out of an impulse of gratitude, don't they?
Yeah, they
No?
do.
Or do you think
I
gratitude
liked
is
hearing
overrated?
Gratitude is overrated. Oh, I think it's a very good thing to develop it and realise. And my mother used to say to me all the time, what is it? Blessings. Be thankful for your blessings or something. Count your blessings, yeah. And I didn't like the accountancy aspect of this. And eventually we had a bit of a falling out about this, and I said, no, share your blessings. And that's what my argument with her was, and she couldn't acknowledge that there was something in that. But I was being petty, I guess, about that.
I think we've got one last question. You've been very patient.
Oh, thank you. It's been an amazing evening. Question is partly answered. Just before you spoke about those amazing bells in Italy,
Yes.
I was thinking, where's music fit into Michael's life? And then you spoke about the songbird in Ireland. So do you have another story about your relationship with sound and or music?
Yeah, well, I've worked with a lot of musicians, and they've turned my texts into songs, and so I've always enjoyed the company of musicians. And I don't know, is it a lyrical way of seeing or feeling the flow, harmony, sometimes dissonance? I don't know. What do musicians do? They create an astonishing thing for us.
Can you sing? Do you have a voice?
Not anymore, no. I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes I'm always captivated by some song or another, and I listen every morning. I put on the ABC Classic FM. When they come on, I switch it on, and then I enjoy it thoroughly, and then sometimes I think that's neurotic, that piece of music. It's aggravating and it's a nuisance, and then I get sick of all their excellence and the way that the presenters say, this was an amazing performance that was recorded, and then it's an amazing performance, and another amazing performance. And I think, is this natural to be having be so saturated? You know, it takes Mozart a long time to write this piece, and you just pop it on a machine and play it and play it and play it and play it. And so you hear this saturation of music coming through the airwaves, and I think that's sort of not the spirit of music. In some ways, it's just a commodity, and we're gorging ourselves on it. But to sit with a musician or a little, an orchestra or string quartet or something, and hear it, or a busker in the street, and some African buskers in Melbourne, sometimes you hear things, you go, what is that? And so it's all good, and I think if it does inform the way you write or talk to each other, if there's a musicality in the way we talk, I think that's lovely when you hear a voice that's got a musicality to it. I'm not sure I have one or I'll think about it, but I'm affected by a voice, because we touch each other with our voice, do we not? And Pauline's voice is not so musical, and so it's lovely to hear a bit of musicality in the voice. And
we can't end on Pauline. We just can't.
Did I cover about prayer?
Could I sing? When I think about closing or opening the day, here's a little song that I sing about being able to be open to creativity. Can I give that to you?
Oh, yeah,
thank you. Just take me as I am, summon out what I shall be, Set your seal upon my heart and live in me. Amen.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
Wow.
Where is that song from?
It's from the Iona community in Scotland.
Ah, I know.
Yes,
the
the author is a man called John Bell,
Yeah.
and it's an ecumenical, non-denominational social justice
I've heard of
group of
this.
people, and the Iona community. And I just think to myself, I summon out what I could be, and you've done that tonight. You summon
Yeah.
out for us
Yeah.
the beauty of life.
Yeah,
Thank
well,
you, Michael.
and you bring back to me the songs that I keep referring back to. What were the cradle songs we heard? And I remember my cradle song and the thing my grandmother sang me, and all those sad songs and beautiful songs, but wouldn't stand up in today's world, too corny or something, but beautiful. And so you drink it in when you're a child, and it's with you always, and that your one was lovely. And you remind me, I did it, the Kiwis, our friends, our cousins, the Kiwis. I was once in New Zealand and I'd given a talk at a psychotherapy conference, and a woman was selected to come forward, and she stood in front, as a way of saying thank you, and she sang me, she was a Maori woman, and she sang a Maori song to me. I was so touched, and they continued to do this through the conference. They would thank or acknowledge each other in song. And it's a bit of a singing nation, I reckon, and Australia, I wish we could get that going a bit more.
Well, if anybody can do that, I think it might be you, Michael Leunig. We have to stop now, because otherwise we're going to be here until midnight, which would be fine by me and probably most of you, but I'm not sure how the organisers would feel about that. Thank you so much for being a beautiful, generous, warm, wonderful audience, and please join me now in thanking Michael Leunig.
Thank you.